Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UESA Defiance, staring at the star map that showed human space. The ship was quiet, except for the soft hum of engines and the beeping of computers. His crew worked at their stations, checking systems, and reading reports from across the galaxy. The communication panel started flashing red. Jake walked over to see what was happening. Officer Rick Torres looked up from his screen with worry in his eyes. "Captain, we have an incoming message." "It's not from any human ship or station," Rick said. His voice was tense. "Where is it coming?" "From?" Jake asked. "Unknown source, sir." "The signal is strong and clear. It's definitely alien technology." Jake felt his stomach tighten. Humans had been in space for over 200 years, but contact with alien races was still rare. Most aliens ignored humans completely. When they did make contact, it was usually not good news. "Put it on the main screen," Jake ordered. The view screen flickered and changed. Instead of stars, they now saw a large alien face. The creature had blue-gray skin and 4 yellow eyes. Its mouth was filled with sharp teeth. Behind it, Jake could see other aliens of different species standing together. "I am Admiral Vextar of the Zephyrian Collective," the alien said. Its voice was deep and cold. "I speak for 12 species and 3,000 worlds. We have watched your kind spread through space like a disease." Jake remained calm, but his hands were shaking slightly. He had heard stories about the Collective. They controlled a huge part of the galaxy and had never lost a war. "We demand that all human colonies beyond your home system surrender immediately." The alien continued. "You will abandon your outer worlds and submit to collective rule. Your species will serve us as workers and soldiers." Rick Torres moved closer to Jake. "Sir, they're serious. I'm reading massive energy signatures throughout the sector. There are ships everywhere." The alien admiral on screen continued speaking. "You have 72 hours to accept our terms. If you refuse, we will destroy every human world and kill every member of your species. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." The transmission ended. The bridge was silent for a long moment. Dr. Lisa Grant, the ship's science officer, was the first to speak. "Captain, I've been studying alien technology for years. The Collective has weapons and shields far beyond anything we have. They're smallest. Ships are more powerful than our biggest battleships." Jake nodded slowly. He knew the odds were impossible. Humanity had maybe 500 ships total. The Collective had thousands, and each one was superior to human technology. "Get me Admiral Sullivan on Earth," Jake ordered. "Emergency channel." Within minutes, Admiral Kate Sullivan's face appeared on screen. She was an older woman with gray hair and tired eyes. Behind her, Jake could see other military leaders rushing around in panic. "Jake, please tell me you have good news," she said. "No, ma'am. The Collective just gave us an ultimatum. Surrender in 72 hours or face complete destruction." Admiral Sullivan closed her eyes for a moment. "We've been getting similar messages across all sectors. Our scouts report massive alien fleets moving toward human space. The numbers are overwhelming. What are your orders, Admiral?" "I'm calling an emergency meeting of all fleet commanders and government leaders. We need to decide how to respond." "But Jake, I want you to know something. The preliminary vote from Earth's government is already in, and we're not surrendering." Jake felt a mix of pride and terror. He was proud that humanity would not give up without a fight, but he also knew what this meant. They were choosing to fight a war they could not win. "Admiral, with respect, how can we possibly fight them? They outnumber us 10 to 1, and their technology is centuries ahead of ours." Admiral Sullivan smiled grimly. "That's what we need to figure out. The Collective has ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They've won every war while using superior technology an overwhelming force. But there's one thing they don't understand about humans. What's that? We don't fight fair. After the call ended, Jake gathered his senior officers in the conference room. The mood was dark. Everyone knew what they were facing. Rick Torres pulled up tactical displays showing the approaching alien fleets. "Sir, the numbers are even worse than we thought. Intelligence reports suggest over 3,000 ships heading our way. Some of them are the size of small moons." Dr. Grant had been working on her computer during the meeting. "I've been analyzing the alien transmission. Their technology uses quantum field generators for shields and weapons. It's incredibly advanced, but there might be a weakness." "What kind of weakness?" Jake asked. "Their systems all operate on the same quantum frequency. It makes them very powerful, but it also means they've never had to defend against certain types of attacks that disrupt quantum fields." Jake leaned forward. "Do we have anything that can do that?" "Actually, yes. The quantum disruptors we use for asteroid mining operate on a completely different principle. I don't think the collective has ever encountered anything like them." Rick Torres looked skeptical. "Even if that works, we still can't match their numbers. They'll overwhelm us through sheer force." Jake stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see other human ships preparing for war. Most of the crews probably knew they were going to die, but they were still getting ready to fight. "The Admiral is right," Jake said finally. "We can't fight them the way they expect. We need to think differently. The collective has always won by following the same strategy. Massive fleets and organized formations, overwhelming firepower, and superior technology. So what do we do instead?" Dr. Grant asked. Jake turned back to his officers. "We make them fight our kind of war. We use every dirty trick humans have ever learned. We hit them where they don't expect it. We make every ship, every station, every world cost them more than they thought possible." "Sir, that sounds like you're talking about suicide missions," Rick said quietly. "Maybe I am. But if we're going to die anyway, let's make sure they remember why they should have left humanity alone." The meeting continued for hours as they planned their response. Outside, more ships arrived every hour. The entire human fleet was gathering for what everyone knew would be their final battle. But Jake Morrison had learned something important about humans during his years in space. When pushed to the edge, when facing impossible odds, humans didn't give up. They got creative, they got desperate. And sometimes that was enough to surprise even the most powerful enemies in the galaxy. The countdown had begun. In 72 hours, the collective would learn what humans were really capable of when they chose war. President Amanda Clark stood before the cameras in the White House press room. Behind her, the flags of Earth and the United Colonies hung side by side. Her face was calm, but her eyes showed the weight of the decision she was about to announce. "My fellow humans," she began, "we have received an ultimatum from an alien force called the Zephyrian Collective. They demand our surrender and our submission to their rule." Around the world and across the colonies, billions of people watched and listened. In the streets of New York, London, and Tokyo, crowds had gathered around public screens. On Mars, families huddled in their homes. On the mining stations around Jupiter, workers stopped their jobs to hear the president speak. "After consulting with our military leaders and colonial governments, we have reached a decision," Amanda continued. "Humanity will not bow to these threats. We choose freedom over slavery. We choose to fight." The reaction was immediate. In some places, people cheered. In others, they wept. Everyone understood what this meant. They were choosing war against an enemy they probably could not defeat. On Mars, Colonel Ben Hayes was already deep in planning. His office was filled with military officers from every branch of service. Maps covered the walls showing human space and the approaching alien fleets. The conventional approach won't work, Ben told his staff. They have better ships, better weapons, and more of everything. If we line up our fleets against theirs, we'll be destroyed in hours. Commander Julie Parker, one of the youngest officers in the room, raised her hand. What if we don't line up against them? What if we make them come to us on our terms? Explain that, Ben said. Every war the collective has fought, they've used the same strategy. Massive formations, direct assault, overwhelming force. They've never faced an enemy that refused to fight that way. An older officer shook his head. You're talking about guerrilla warfare in space. It's never been done on this scale. That's exactly why it might work, Julie replied. They won't expect it because no one has ever tried it. Meanwhile, on Luna Base, engineer Maria Santos was working with her team to turn civilian ships into weapons. The shipyard was busy with workers installing new systems on cargo ships, passenger liners, and mining vessels. Maria, this is crazy, said her assistant engineer, Dan Lewis. You want to put military weapons on a garbage hauler? Not just weapons, Maria replied, holding up a technical drawing. We're turning every civilian ship into a potential threat. The aliens will scan our ships and see cargo vessels. They won't realize each one is carrying enough explosives to take out a battleship. The plan was simple but dangerous. Every human ship would be armed with hidden weapons. More importantly, every ship would carry quantum charges that could destroy both the ship and anything near it. The crews volunteering for these missions knew they weren't coming home. Dr. Alex Chan was working on the quantum disruptor project in his laboratory deep inside Luna Base. The equipment around him hummed with energy as he tested different frequencies. Lisa, look at this, he called to Dr. Grant, who was visiting from the Defiance. The collective's shields work by creating a quantum field barrier, but our mining disruptors create interference on completely different quantum levels. Lisa studied the readings on his screen. You're saying our mining equipment can break through their shields? I'm saying our mining equipment can collapse their shields entirely. The problem is range. These disruptors only work at close distance. How? Close? Close enough to ram them. Back on Earth, the evacuation of the outer colonies had begun. But this wasn't a normal evacuation. Military planners were turning the process into part of their strategy. Captain Sam Rodriguez was loading the last transport ship from New Haven Colony. The planet looked empty now, but that was an illusion. Underground, thousands of volunteers. We're preparing to stay behind. Sam, you sure about this? Asked Lieutenant Amy Foster, who was staying with the Hidden Defenders. You could take the transport and get out of here. And miss the chance to show these aliens what humans can do? Not likely, Sam replied. Besides, someone has to ram that mining ship into their flagship. Amy smiled sadly. They both knew Sam's mission was suicide. His ship would be loaded with quantum charges and aimed directly at the largest enemy vessel. But it might give the Hidden Defenders the chance they needed. Across human space, similar preparations were taking place. Every colony was being turned into a trap. Buildings were rigged with explosives. Underground tunnels were filled with weapons and supplies. The aliens would find what looked like empty worlds, but they would really be walking into carefully planned ambushes. The psychological warfare had already begun. Human ships were broadcasting surrender messages while secretly moving into attack positions. Colonies were sending signals, claiming they wanted to negotiate. Drawing alien ships closer to the hidden weapons. Dr. Grant had made another important discovery. She had been studying collective communications and found something interesting about how their alliance worked. The different alien species in the collective don't really trust each other, she explained to the Defense Committee. They're held together by shared technology and fear of their leaders. But each species has its own culture and biology. How does that help us? Asked Admiral Sullivan. If we can disrupt their unity, their whole alliance might fall apart. I'm working on biological agents that could interfere with their communication systems. Imagine if their fleet commanders suddenly couldn't coordinate with each other. The plan was becoming clearer. Humanity would not fight a conventional war. Instead, they would use every advantage they had. Surprise attacks, hidden weapons, psychological warfare, and biological sabotage. Every human ship would be a potential suicide bomber. Every colony would be a death trap, but the cost would be enormous. Most of the volunteers knew they would die in the first attacks. Entire colonies would be destroyed. The human fleet would be sacrificed to cause maximum damage to the enemy. President Clark addressed the nation again as the 72-hour deadline approached. "We know the odds," she said. "We know what this will cost us. But we also know who we are. Humans have never accepted defeat when freedom was at stake. We have fought tyrants on Earth, and now we will fight them among the stars." On the Defiance, Captain Morrison received his final orders. His ship would lead the first wave of attacks, using the new quantum disruptors to break through enemy shields. Other ships would follow, ramming the alien vessels before they could adapt the new weapons. "Sir, the crew is ready," Rick Torres reported. "Everyone knows the mission." Jake nodded. Around them, the bridge crew worked quietly. These people had families back on Earth. They had dreams and plans for the future. But they were willing to give up everything to protect humanity's freedom. Dr. Grant approached Jake with a datapad. "Captain, I've been analyzing the alien fleet compositions. Their command ships are heavily protected, but they rely on constant communication with their support vessels. If we can take out the command ships, their formations will lose coordination." "How many command ships are there?" "In the first wave, about 50. Each one controls hundreds of smaller vessels." Jake looked at the tactical display. 50 suicide. Missions to take out 50 command ships. It seemed impossible, but it was their only chance. The countdown reached its final hours. Across human space, ships were moving into position. Volunteers were saying goodbye to their families. Weapons were being armed and aimed at incoming alien fleets. The collective had given humanity 72 hours to surrender. Instead, humanity had used those hours to prepare for the most desperate battle in their history. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had something the collective had never faced before. They had nothing left to lose. The collective fleet arrived at New Haven like a storm of metal and energy. Admiral Vexstar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the human colony grow larger on his screens. Around him, over 800 ships moved in perfect formation. "The planet appears to be abandoned," reported his tactical officer, a tall alien with purple skin and 6 arms. "We detect no military vessels, no defense platforms, no signs of resistance." Vexstar's 4 eyes narrowed. In his experience, humans were stubborn creatures who usually fought to the last soldier. This felt wrong. "Scan for hidden installations," he ordered. "These humans may have underground facilities." The scans came back mostly empty. A few scattered energy readings from what looked like abandoned mining equipment, but nothing that seemed dangerous. The cities were dark and silent. "Perhaps they simply ran away," suggested his communications officer. "These humans are known to be cowards when faced with superior force." Vexstar had studied human military history during the flight. To their space, humans were many things, but cowards was not one of them. They had fought wars on their own planet for thousands of years, often against impossible odds. Something was wrong here. "Begin orbital bombardment of the military facilities," he commanded. "Destroy their spaceports and manufacturing centers." Leave the cities intact for now. We may need them later. The first wave of energy beams struck the planet's surface. Explosions bloomed across the empty spaceports and factories. But as the smoke cleared, Vexstar saw something that made his blood run cold. The explosions were much bigger than they should have been. "Sir, those weren't just our weapons," the tactical officer reported. The humans had rigged their own facilities with explosives. They're destroying everything themselves. Before Vexstar could respond, his ship's alarms started screaming. On the tactical display, small objects were moving toward his fleet from the asteroid belt around the planet. "Asteroids?" he asked. "No, sir, those are ships. Small ones, but they're accelerating at incredible speed." Captain Sam Rodriguez gripped the controls of his converted mining ship as it raced toward the alien fleet. Behind him, the quantum charges that Maria Santos had installed hummed with deadly energy. His ship looked like a piece of space junk, but it was really a guided missile aimed at the enemy flagship. "This is for humanity," Sam said into his radio, knowing no one could hear him. In the vacuum of space, the collective ships opened fire, but Sam's vessel was too small and too fast. Their weapons were designed to fight other large warships, not tiny attack craft moving at maximum speed. Most of the energy beams missed completely. Sam's ship slammed into the side of the Eternal Dominion at nearly the speed of light. The quantum charges exploded in a blinding flash of energy. On the bridge of his flagship, Vexstar was thrown to the floor as his ship shook violently. Alarms screamed and lights flickered. When he got back to his feet, he saw something impossible on his. "Damage reports." "Sir, our shields are down," the tactical officer reported in shock. "That ship, it somehow collapsed our entire defensive grid." "That's impossible. Our shields have never failed. The weapon they used, it disrupted our quantum field generators. Our shields aren't just down, they're completely offline." More alarms started ringing as other human ships struck targets throughout the fleet. Each attack ship was small and seemed harmless until it exploded. And each explosion brought down the shields of massive collective warships. But the real surprise came from the planet itself. Lieutenant Amy Foster crouched in her underground command bunker, watching the alien ships through hidden cameras scattered across the colony. The orbital bombardment had been the signal she was waiting for. "All units, this is command," she spoke into her radio. "The aliens have taken the bait. Begin phase 2. Across the planet's surface, what the aliens had thought were abandoned cities came alive with hidden weapons. Building after building opened up to reveal missile launchers that had been disguised as normal structures. The missiles launched in waves, racing toward the alien ships that no longer had shields to protect them. Underground tunnels that the aliens hadn't detected opened like the mouths of giant worms. More weapons emerged, including massive railguns that fired solid metal projectiles at incredible speed. Even the mining equipment that the aliens had detected turned out to be weapons. The quantum disruptors that Dr. Chun had modified were powerful enough to reach orbit when fired at full power. Vexstar watched in horror as his fleet came under attack from every direction. Ships that had ruled space for millennia were being destroyed by weapons fired from planet-bound installations. His tactical displays showed red warning symbols everywhere. "Sir, we've lost over 200 ships," his tactical officer reported. "The humans have turned their entire planet into a weapon. Return fire. Destroy everything on that planet." "We're trying, sir, but our ships are having trouble coordinating. The humans are jamming our communications, and their weapons are disrupting our formation protocols." The space around New Haven became a graveyard of burning ships. Human attack. Vessels continued to ram collective warships, trading one small ship for one large one. It was a terrible exchange rate for humanity, but they were making it count. Amy Foster's bunker shook as alien weapons struck the surface above her. She knew the planet was doomed. Every human defender would die here, but they were taking as many aliens with them as possible. "Command to all units," she broadcast. "Remember, we're not trying to win this battle. We're trying to make them pay for every inch of space they take." The battle raged for hours. The collective had overwhelming numbers and superior technology, but they had never faced an enemy that fought like this. Every building could be a weapon. Every piece of debris could hide an attack ship. Every asteroid could be full of explosives. Doctor Grant's biological weapons had also begun to work. Several alien species in the collective fleet started experiencing communication problems. Their coordination broke down as different species stopped trusting each other's orders. As the planet burned around her, Amy Foster prepared the final surprise. Deep underground, human engineers had built one last weapon. It was a massive quantum charge, large enough to crack the planet's crust and create a shock wave that would damage any ship in orbit. "This is command to all remaining units," Amy broadcast. "Final protocol in 60 seconds. It's been an honor serving with you." She armed the planet killer weapon and watched the countdown on her screen. Around her, the last human defenders prepared. For the end, when the weapon exploded, it split New Haven in half. The shock wave raced outward, destroying the remaining human installations, but also crippling dozens of alien ships that were too close to the planet. Admiral Vexstar stood on his damaged bridge, staring at the broken world below. His fleet had won, but the cost was enormous. Out of 800 ships, only 500 remained functional. The rest were destroyed or too damaged to fight. "Sir, we're receiving reports from our other fleets," his communications officer said quietly. "The humans are using similar tactics everywhere. Every colony is a trap. Every ship is a weapon." Vexstar felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career: doubt. The collective had always won through superior force and technology. But these humans were fighting a completely different kind of war. "How many ships have we lost across all fronts?" he asked. "Over 1,500, sir. And the humans haven't even deployed their main fleet yet." Vexstar looked at the tactical displays showing human space. There were dozens of colonies, each one potentially as dangerous as New Haven. And somewhere out there, the human military was preparing for the next phase of their desperate war. For the first time in collective history, Admiral Vexstar began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake by challenging humanity. The humans had drawn first blood, and it was a deep cut indeed. News of the Battle of New Haven spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. On worlds that had been conquered by the collective decades ago, enslaved populations heard whispers that the invincible alien empire had suffered a major defeat. Jake Morrison received the reports while his ship drifted in dark space near the outer rim of human territory. The Defiance and 12 other ships floated silently, their engines cold and their communication systems turned off. They were completely invisible to enemy sensors. "Sir, the quantum disruptors worked even better than Dr. Chon predicted." "Rick," Torres whispered, even though no one could hear them in the vacuum of space. "New Haven took out over 800 enemy ships." Jake nodded grimly. The victory had cost them an entire colony and thousands of lives, but it proved that humans could hurt the collective. More importantly, it showed that the aliens weren't as invincible as they pretended to be. "What's our status?" Jake asked. "All ships are ready for Ghost Protocol," Rick replied. "We've been drifting for 6 hours. The enemy fleet passed right by us without detecting anything." This was humanity's new strategy. Instead of fighting in large formations that the aliens could track and destroy, human ships operated alone or in small groups. They used pre-planned attack patterns that required no communication between ships. Each captain knew exactly when and where to strike, then disappeared back into space. Commander Julie Parker had pioneered the Ghost Fleet tactics from her ship, the Silent Running. Her vessel looked like a damaged freighter, drifting helplessly through space. In reality, it was packed with quantum charges and guided missiles. "Contact in 30 minutes, her navigator reported quietly. "Collective Patrol Squadron, 3. "Ships," Julie smiled coldly. The aliens were still using standard patrol formations, expecting to face conventional enemies. They had no idea that what looked like harmless space debris could suddenly come alive with weapons. The alien ships passed, close to the Silent Running, scanning it briefly. Their sensors detected a damaged human freighter with no life signs and failing power systems. They ignored it completely. As soon as they passed, Julie's ship sprang to life. Hidden weapon ports opened and fired a barrage of missiles at the alien ship's engines. Before the aliens could react, the Silent Running rammed the largest enemy vessel and exploded. The other human ships in the area immediately attacked the remaining alien vessels. Within minutes, the entire patrol was destroyed. Then the human ships scattered in different directions, disappearing into the darkness of space. This pattern repeated across dozens of star systems. Small human forces would strike quickly and vanish before the aliens could respond. The collective found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't see or predict. On Earth, Dr. Lisa Grant was working around the clock to improve the biological weapons she had developed. Her laboratory was filled with samples from different alien species in the collective. "The neural disruption agent is working," she reported to Admiral Sullivan during their daily briefing. "We've confirmed that several alien fleets have lost coordination after exposure. Their different species are starting to fight each other." "How are we delivering the weapon?" Admiral Sullivan asked. "Small drones launched from our ghost ships. The aliens don't even know they've been infected until their communication systems start failing." The biological weapon was more than just a tool of war. It was psychological warfare that struck at the heart of the collective's greatest weakness. The alien alliance was held together by fear and technology, not trust or friendship. When their technology failed, their alliance began to crumble. Engineer Maria Santos had taken her ship conversion program to new levels. On hidden bases throughout human space, her teams were creating weapons that the galaxy had never seen before. "We call them Trojan horses," she explained to a group of volunteer pilots. "Your ship will look exactly like a piece of destroyed alien technology. Their salvage teams will try to recover you, thinking you're valuable wreckage." The pilots nodded grimly. They understood the mission. Once their disguised ships were brought aboard alien vessels, they would detonate massive explosives that would destroy entire enemy fleets from within. Dan Lewis, Maria's assistant, had volunteered for one of these suicide missions. His ship had been modified to look like a damaged alien fighter craft. Hidden inside were enough quantum charges to destroy a battleship. "You sure about this, Dan?" Maria asked as they prepared his ship for launch. "Someone has to do it," Dan replied. "Besides, if this works, we might be able to take out one of their fleet commanders. That could save thousands of human lives." The Trojan horse attacks began hitting collective salvage operations across multiple sectors. Alien crews would recover what they thought were their own damaged ships, only to have them explode once they were brought aboard. The psychological impact was devastating. Collective forces began to distrust their own equipment, but the aliens were learning too. Admiral Vextar had called a meeting of all collective fleet commanders to discuss new tactics for fighting the humans. "These creatures fight without honor," complained Admiral Kethver, a reptilian alien whose fleet had lost 30 ships to ghost attacks. "They hide like cowards and strike from the shadows. Honor is a luxury we cannot afford," Vextar replied. "The humans are winning because they refuse to fight the way we expect. We must adapt or face complete defeat. The collective began changing their tactics. They started traveling in larger formations that were harder for small human forces to attack. They implemented new scanning procedures to detect hidden ships. Most importantly, they began targeting human civilian populations directly. Captain Morrison watched the reports of orbital bombardments with growing anger. The aliens were destroying human colonies that had already been evacuated, turning entire worlds into lifeless rocks. It was a message: surrender or watch every human world burn. "Sir, we're receiving new orders from Fleet Command," Rick Torres reported. "We're to begin Operation Broken Chain." Jake had been waiting for this order. It was the most dangerous phase of humanity's war plan. Instead of just hitting military targets, human forces would begin attacking the collective supply lines and communication networks. The goal was to isolate different parts of the alien empire from each other. If the collective couldn't coordinate their vast fleets, they would become vulnerable to larger human attacks. Dr. Grant's biological weapons played a crucial role in this phase. Human ships began targeting alien communication satellites and command stations, infecting them with a neural disruption agent. Within days, entire sectors of the collective empire lost contact with their central command. The effects were immediate. Alien species that had been forced to work together for centuries began acting independently. Some fleets stopped following orders from the central command. Others started fighting each other over resources and territory. On a dozen different worlds, enslaved populations began to rebel. The alien garrison forces were confused and disorganized. Some species refused to help others maintain control. The collective's empire was fracturing from within. But the cost to humanity continued to grow. Every successful attack required the sacrifice of human ships and crews. Entire colonies were being destroyed to prevent them from falling into alien hands. The human population was shrinking rapidly. Admiral Sullivan called an emergency meeting of all surviving fleet commanders. The holographic conference brought together captains from across human space, many of them commanding the last ships in Reich. Their sectors. "The biological weapons and ghost attacks are working," she reported. "The collective is losing control of their outer territories. But we're running out of ships and people to continue the fight." Captain Morrison spoke up from his position near the enemy front lines. "Admiral, what's the status of the core worlds? Are Earth and Mars still safe?" Sullivan's expression was grim. "For now, but the aliens are massing their largest fleet for a final assault on our home system. Over 2,000 ships are heading toward Earth." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The collective was preparing to end the war by destroying humanity's birthworld and primary colonies. "What are our options?" asked Commander Parker, her face showing the strain of months of desperate fighting. "We make our final stand," Sullivan replied. "Every remaining human ship will defend Earth. We'll use every weapon, every tactic, every dirty trick we've learned. And if we can't win, we'll make sure the collective pays such a high price that they'll never threaten anyone else again." "Jake." Morrison looked around at the faces of his fellow commanders. These people had watched their fleets destroyed and their worlds burned. They had sacrificed everything to give humanity a chance to survive, but they weren't defeated. In their eyes, he could see the same determination that had driven humans to survive ice ages, plagues, and world wars. The collective had awakened something in humanity that they didn't understand. The war was spreading beyond just the conflict between humans and aliens. Across the galaxy, oppressed species were beginning to rebel against their collective masters. The example of human resistance was inspiring others to fight for their freedom. The final battle for Earth was coming, but the outcome would determine more than just humanity's survival. It would decide whether the galaxy would remain under the The final collective armada approached Earth like a wave of death. Admiral Vexstar commanded over 2,000 ships, the largest fleet in galactic history. Every remaining collective vessel had been called to this battle. The plan was simple: destroy Earth and end human resistance forever. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the command center on Luna Base, watching the enemy fleet grow larger on her screens. Around her, the last leaders of humanity prepared for their final battle. The room was quiet, except for the soft beeping of computers and the distant hum of life support systems. "Fleet status report," she ordered. 247 ships ready for combat," Captain Morrison replied from the Defiance. "Every vessel is loaded with quantum charges. Every crew has volunteered for ramming attacks," Sullivan nodded. The math was brutal. 2,000 enemy ships against less than 250 human vessels. But the numbers didn't tell the whole story. Every human ship was now a guided missile aimed at the heart of the collective fleet. What about the special weapons? Sullivan asked. Dr. Lisa Grant spoke up from her position at the science station. "All biological agents are ready for deployment. The neural disruption weapons have been loaded into every available delivery system. We also have the Planet Killer. Charges ready." The Planet Killer weapons were humanity's final card. If they couldn't win the battle, they would detonate charges that would destroy Earth itself. The explosion would be large enough to damage or destroy every ship in the solar system. It was the ultimate sacrifice, but it would ensure that the collective paid the maximum price for their victory. "President." Amanda Clark's voice came over the communication system from her bunker deep inside Earth. "Admiral, you have full authorization to use any weapon necessary. If we're going to die, let's make sure the galaxy remembers what happens when you threaten humanity." Captain Morrison felt the weight of command as he prepared his ship for the final battle. His crew worked quietly at their stations, checking weapons and systems one last time. They all knew this was a suicide mission, but their faces showed determination rather than fear. "Sir, the enemy fleet is entering the outer solar system," Rick Torres reported. "They're maintaining formation. It looks like they plan to destroy everything systematically." "Good," Jake replied. "That means they're still thinking like the old collective. They haven't learned that we don't fight fair." The first phase of the battle began as the human ghost. Fleet struck. Ships that had been hiding behind asteroids and moons suddenly came alive with weapons. The attacks followed the same pattern that had worked throughout the war. Small forces hitting hard and fast, then disappearing. But this time was different. The collective had learned from their previous defeats. Their ships were arranged in tight defensive formations. When human vessels attacked, they found themselves facing concentrated firepower from dozens of enemy ships. Commander Julie Parker led one of the ghost attacks against the alien vanguard. Her ship, disguised as space debris, drifted close to a group of enemy vessels before opening fire. But as soon as she attacked, the entire collective formation turned their weapons on her. "This is Parker to all ships," she broadcast as her vessel shook under enemy fire. "They're ready for us this time." Changing to ramming speed, her ship accelerated directly toward the largest enemy vessel, quantum charges armed and ready. The explosion took out 3 alien ships, but it also marked the end of the Ghost Fleet's effectiveness. The collective had finally adapted to human tactics. Admiral Vexstar watched the human attacks with grim satisfaction. His losses were much smaller than in previous battles. The humans were still dangerous, but they could no longer surprise him. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy buildups throughout the human fleet," his tactical officer reported. "They're charging their weapons for a major assault." "Let them come," Vexstar replied. "We outnumber them 10 to 1. Today, we end this war." But as the main human fleet moved into attack position, something unexpected happened. Ships began appearing from all directions around the solar system. These weren't human vessels. They were alien ships, but they were firing on the collective fleet. "Sir, we're under attack by Zephyrian vessels," the tactical officer reported in confusion. "But those are our own people." Vexstar stared at the tactical display in shock. Several species that were supposed to be part of the collective were attacking his fleet. The neural disruption weapons and months of seeing the collective's failures had finally broken their loyalty. Dr. Grant's biological weapons had done more than disrupt alien communications. They had shown enslaved species that the collective could be defeated. Across the galaxy, rebellions were breaking out as different alien races fought for their freedom. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the rebel ships," the communications officer reported. On the main screen, the face of an alien captain appeared. It was one of the reptilian species that had been conquered by the collective centuries ago. "I am Captain Sektar of the Liberation Fleet," the alien said. "We have watched humans fight for their freedom, and it has inspired us to fight for ours. Today, we stand together against tyranny." The battle became chaos as former collective allies turned against each other. Ships that had fought side by side for generations were now deadly enemies. The rigid formation that Vexstar had planned fell apart as his fleet split into different factions. Captain Morrison saw the opportunity and seized it. "All ships, this is our chance. Attack now while they're distracted." A human fleet charged into the confused mass of alien vessels. Quantum disruptors tore through enemy shields, while ramming attacks destroyed ship after ship. But the cost was enormous. For every alien vessel destroyed, humanity lost precious ships they couldn't replace. As the battle raged around Earth, Admiral Sullivan prepared the final option. Deep inside the planet, massive quantum charges had been placed at key points. If detonated simultaneously, they would tear the world apart and create an explosion visible from neighboring star systems. "Ma'am, the fleet is taking heavy casualties," reported her tactical officer. "We've lost over half our ships." "How many enemy vessels are still operational?" "Approximately 800, but they're scattered and fighting each other as much as they're fighting us." Sullivan made the hardest decision of her life. Prepare the planet killer charges. If we can't save Earth, we'll make sure the collective never forgets what they've done. But before she could give the final order, Captain Morrison's voice crackled over the communication system. "Admiral, this is the Defiance. We've broken through to the enemy flagship. Beginning final ramming attack." Jake Morrison stood on his bridge as his ship raced toward the massive alien command vessel. Around him, his crew prepared for impact. They had disabled the enemy's shields with quantum disruptors, and now they would deliver the killing blow. "It's been an honor serving with you all," Jake told his crew as they approached the enemy ship. The Defiance struck the collective flagship at maximum speed. The explosion was so bright it could be seen from Earth's surface. When the light faded, both ships were gone. With their command structure destroyed and their fleet in chaos, the remaining collective forces began to retreat. The rebel aliens continued to pursue them, settling old scores that had been building. For centuries, the Battle of Earth was over, but the cost had been enormous. Of the 247 human ships that had started the battle, only 31 survived. Earth itself was heavily damaged from orbital bombardment. Millions of people had died, but humanity had achieved something that seemed impossible. They had defeated the collective and inspired a galactic revolution. Across dozens of worlds, enslaved species were declaring their independence. The empire that had ruled for millennia was crumbling. Admiral Sullivan stood in the ruins of her command center, looking out at the damaged Earth through a cracked window. The planet would heal, and humanity would rebuild. But they would never forget the price of freedom. President Clark's voice came over the emergency communication system. "Admiral, we're receiving messages from across the galaxy. Over 50 species have declared independence from the collective. They're asking humanity to help form a new galactic alliance based on freedom rather than conquest." Sullivan smiled sadly as she thought about all the brave people who had died to make this moment possible. Captain Morrison, Commander Parker, Lieutenant Foster, and thousands of others had given their lives so that future generations could live free. "Tell them yes," she replied. "Humanity will help build a better galaxy. It's what our people died for." The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. Humanity had shown the galaxy that even the most powerful empire could be defeated if people were willing to fight for their freedom. The example they set would inspire resistance movements for generations to come. In the years that followed, a new galactic alliance emerged from the ashes of the collective. It was built on principles of cooperation rather than domination, freedom rather than slavery. And at its heart was humanity's simple but powerful message: no one has the right to enslave another species. The collective had chosen war with humanity, expecting an easy victory. Instead, they had awakened a force that changed the galaxy forever. The humans had indeed shown them how war was done, and the lesson would never be forgotten.